Welcome to Battle or CSS Battle. This is Battle 1 Challenge 4 or Target 4. It's called Ups and Downs. In this very short video, we're going to try to replicate this design here on the right by using HTML and CSS on the left panel here. Yeah, so we'll kind of jump right in, but before we do that, I guess we can maybe talk about how we would even want to approach this in the very first place. A lot of the times, I think we just kind of jump right in without even thinking through and try to figure things out as we go. I think that works, but at the same time, my personal preference is always to maybe talk about this a little bit before we jump in. So, looking at this UI here, of course, we have this outer container with a background color of purplish, I guess. I guess it's purple, yeah. And inside that we have these three shapes that are very similar to each other, but maybe just have different, I guess, rotations going on. So this one's like 360 of this, basically, if you turn that around, or maybe it's more like 180 actually, rather. Um, but but that's just like how the shapes usually go. But because these three shapes are sort of sitting right next to each other, it probably makes more sense to group them together as part of one container. Um, so in HTML terms, you could maybe think about this as sort of having one parent div that will contain these three divs. And of course, they're again grouped together because they're like sitting right next to each other horizontally, at least, right? So that's one thing. So we have the outer container here, and inside that we have an inner container that contains these three shapes. And of course we have three different divs representing each one of these shapes as well. So with that said, I think we can sort of jump in to at least create an outline for the HTML so we can go ahead and start styling things. So as always, what I tend to do is I try to delete all these comments here, just so we have like a clean slate. And inside this style, I'll keep this empty. By default, what I always do is I select all the items and make sure we don't have any browser default stylings sort of overriding a lot of the styles that we'll see here. So I'll set the padding to 0. I'll also set the margin to 0 as well, and I'll also do box sizing. Oops, I don't know how to spell. Of border box. Okay, great. Now let's make the actual outline. So again, we have the outer container. We'll just call this the container, I guess, in this case. So we'll just give it a class of container. And inside the container, we can maybe have a div that will hold these three shapes. So we'll have another div in here. And we're going to give this a class of something like parent container, but made more like, I don't know, let's do shapes. What do you go, ups and downs? I'll just call it shapes container. Maybe there's a better way of naming it, but I'll just go with this one for now. So that will, of course, hold the actual parent container. And of course, inside that, we'll have three separate children, each representing these shapes. And they're all very similar. So I'll just give this a class of shape. Probably could have done this way better, but what kind of shape is this? Like, I'll just call this a shape. I don't know. I don't really know what was like a. This looks like a door of some sort, like a circular door. I don't know. I'm probably explaining that wrong. I'll just call it shape for now. And of course, we'll have three of these things. And I know these three shapes are, laid out a little bit differently, but they have similar designs, so to speak. This one seems like this one is like, because of the name of the challenge is ups and downs, I'll just call this one up and these two downs. So I'll just call this ups or up, I guess. And then so this one is down actually, right? Because this is the far left one. So I'll just call this down. The next one is up, and the next one is down again. Great. All right, so we have the outline all good to go. Let's go ahead and do the easy parts, which is uh, let's tackle the container. So we'll target the container here, give it a width of, again, 100 V width because this one's taking up the entire container. Select the height or assign the height to 100 view height here as well. And we'll give it a background color of this. Cool, everything good to go there. Now let's work on the parent container. Now notice that the parent container here is centered both vertically and horizontally. So whenever I see situations like that, I tend to use flex boxes to make things easy. So basically the parent container will use flex box to center this item, this entire parent item, vertically and horizontally. So I'll go ahead and select the shapes container. And actually, before we even do that, we don't really have to set any kind of styles to it because it's basically just a holder, right? It's basically just a holder for these three shapes. So maybe we'll just come back to this one, but because we want to center this, for now, I'll give it a width of, let's say, 300 pixels. And again, this is, I'll come back and change this. It will really depend on what the width and height of each of these shapes are. So again, just so we can see what it looks like for now. And we'll give this a height of 200 pixels. And of course, we'll give it a background of green temporarily so we can see exactly what it looks like. And the main idea here is that we want to just see how we can center this in the very first place. So again, we'll use display flex or flexbox to center this shapes container inside the container. So we'll give it a display flex here. We'll give it a justified content of center to center this horizontally. Right there, it's centered horizontally. And of course, if we want to do that vertically, we use align items and set it to, center as well. Great, looks good. Oh, I don't want to save it like that. Okay. Great. Now let's work on the actual shapes. So each one of the shapes are very similar to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and target the shape container. And let's just do the very first one, right? How do we create this? So this one looks like this is probably like a rectangular shape with a border that is set to maybe a specific pixel. So it is this arc-like shape here. So this is basically like a rectangle with a border radius set to a certain value, so to curve the top left and right sides basically. So what we'll do, we will give it a width of, let's say, 100 pixels, and it seems like the width is a little bit higher than the, I don't know, this could be a square perhaps, I don't know, we'll find out. Let's say I'll give it a height of 150 pixels. Cool, and yeah, just so we can see it, first of all, make sure we give it a background color of this right there. Cool. What happened here? Why is this so... Yeah, the height seems way out of place. That's kind of weird. Oh, right. Because these are basically are stacked on top of each other. Makes sense. So in this case, we actually want to make sure that they're stacked horizontally. So how do we do that? Again, flex boxes. I love flex boxes. They're so useful. So what we'll do is we'll target this shapes container and make sure that each item or each one of these shapes are aligned horizontally. So I'll just copy over this display flex and justify content here. Cool. It's hard to see, but we'll go with this one for now. And one thing I want to actually do is make sure these three have separate colors. Or actually, let's give them, yeah, that's fine. Let's give it a, how do we want to do this? So, so it looks like the top one, or the one that's sitting up top here, ups, has the border top and has some sort of border radius to the top, left and right. So what we can do is we can target the ups, or did I call it up or ups? Up. Okay. So I'm going to target the up, and I'm going to give this a border radius of the same as whatever the width is. So basically it's all rounded altogether. I think sometimes if you have different um, width and height, sometimes even adding a radius of 50% might not make it look like it's fully semicircle-ish. So for now, we'll give it a 100 pixel of, there we go. It looks somewhat right, but we don't want to give it a radius around on every side. So I think we're going to give it a border top left radius. There we go. And we're going to do the same thing for the right side. Oops. Back here. Cool. Look at that. It sort of already matches what we had before. Awesome. It looks like maybe the height is not, it's probably a little bit higher than, I guess a little bit lower than I thought. Make this 100. There we go. There we go. Nice. There you go. It matches the top one already. Great. Now, let's go ahead and target the bottom, or down, rather. I have my words mixed up today. I'm going to select the down class here, which means it's going to target these two shapes. Right now, of course, they're all using the same one. So if I want to change that, what I can do is I'm going to change this border top to border bottom. Oh, man, I can't believe it just selected automatically. Okay, border bottom, cool. Everything looks good, but there's a slight problem, and that is that they're sitting up top. I want them to shift down a bit. So how do we do that? Well, we could use something called basically trans. We can use one of those translate property to make sure we can shift it down a bit. So what we can do is we can target the down still, and we'll add this transform property rather, and we can use translate. And I want to translate the y-axis because I want to move it down basically, right? I don't need to move it left or right. So target translate y, and it seems like I want to basically translate it the same as whatever the height of this element is, which in this case is 100 pixels. So I'm going to give it 100 pixels, and well, I think we're done, really, except we have this background color to this container. Again, that was just for initial purposes, just so we can see exactly where the shapes are aligned and everything. So we can get rid of this. We don't really have to set a width here. We don't need a height here. Maybe we do. That's interesting. If we get rid of the height, interesting. So if I get rid of the height, I don't really need the background color. Display flex and everything is looking good. I think what's happening is that when we, I guess we do need the height because the height of this whole thing is basically this 100 pixel here. There's another 100 pixel here. And as you can see, this whole thing matches exactly how we want it. So I'm going to clean this thing up a bit here. And cool, I think we're almost done. Or I guess we're done, really. Right? This one looks exactly how we want this to look. I'm going to click on this diff checker here. This looks like there's basically no mismatches, so that's great. I think this is looking good. Yeah, this is basically how we would build up the HTML and CSS for this shape. I don't think there's any more cleanup to do here. I think this is looking good. Let's go ahead and submit it just so we can see. We got 100% match, hopefully. Perfect. Cool. That will cover it. Thanks, guys.